Hi everyone, this is Dr Raquel Butler from Integrated Veterinary Therapeutics.
And Sophie Vandenberg from Equine Postulate. And we welcome you to the Equine Functional Posture Podcast, your ultimate source for insights into the influence of functional posture on biomechanics, health, and overall well-being of horses.
Whether you're a seasoned equestrian, an equine professional, or simply a horse enthusiast, this podcast is designed to help you understand the critical aspects of functional posture.
Tune in each week as we discuss practical tips, delve into expert interviews, and explore the latest research in the impact of functional posture on equine anatomy, physiology, movement, and more.
Let's create a world where we empower our horses to be in a mental, emotional, and physical balance. Hi everyone, welcome to today's Equine Functional Posture podcast episode. We are chatting to Erika Gough from Inside Out Equine Health. Inside Out Equine Health is a small business based in northeast of Victoria, but she services horses all over Australia. Erika's qualified an independent nutritionist, and she offers personalised diet plans for all horses and sells a small range of supplements that are based on science and not marketing. And you can find her Inside Out Equine Health on Facebook. And I've had her look at some of my diets for my horses, and it made a big difference. So, how are you going today, Soph?
Going really well. I'm excited about this conversation because we had equine nutrition subjects at uni. It definitely opened my eyes to, there's just a lot of subtleties, nuance, marketing. There's just a lot of information about nutrition, and we'd love to share that with people. So alongside founding Inside Out Nutrition 11 years ago now, established 2015, Erika has consulted for lots of high-profile groups. I think it's very cool that you consulted for the Carlton Clydesdales before their retirement. I was reading that. Very cool.
I thought that was very cool too. I was very excited.
Yeah, I'm happy, chuffed for you. And also for the Australian Behaviour Centre, so Equitation Science International, which is a very well-recognised group. And possibly, if you're listening, you may have even read some of what you've published in Hoofbeats and Think Horsemanship. So how are you going today?
Yeah, good, thank you. Thanks so much for having me on the show.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. And we'd love to know a little bit more about how you kind of came to be in this space.
Yeah, so I had a thoroughbred right off the track, like fresh off the track, probably maybe 12 or so years ago. And, as what happens with thoroughbreds off the track, you sort of get them and they look amazing and they're looking all like, healthy and fit. And then they start to let down and they just look terrible. And so I went to the feed store and I said to the guy at the feed store, so I've got this thoroughbred. He's not looking great. What should I feed him? And of course, the guy at the feed store was like, well, you could feed this shiny bag of stuff, or you could feed this shiny bag of stuff. And I said, well, what's in them? What's the difference? And I think he actually had a fairly good sense of humor. So he said, you could feed this one, which is cheap and, basically glorified dust, or you could feed this other one that's more expensive and is slightly less glorified dust. And I was like, there must be some science here. Like, surely there's some science that goes along with equine nutrition. I mean, I'd always been quite interested in human nutrition. And I sort of thought about it and I went, hold on, why am I expecting the guy at the feed store to know what I should feed my horse? It's kind of like walking into Coles and saying, oh, look, I've got an elderly mother and a kid that's got diabetes. What should I feed my family? It's not their job to know really, but they're probably going to have a stab at it. And I went, you know what? I'm really interested in this, and I, ask people, and I get like so many different responses, like feed this, feed this, feed this, and typically it's all, like feed this shiny thing, feed this supplement, feed this bagged thing. And I was like, okay, this is just too complicated and too confusing. I'm going to go and find this out for myself. And so I enrolled in a nutrition course, and I did that while I was working full time at a university, which was probably not ideal because it was a very, very hard time of my life. And then after I'd done the course, I was like, well, I'm armed with all this knowledge now. It's silly not to share it. So I sort of started doing consults for friends, and then I took the big leap of faith and left my, university job to become a full-time nutritionist. And everyone was sort of like, so you're leaving a job at a university where you've been working for 8 years and like worked your way up to start your own business as a horse nutritionist. And I was like, yep.
Love it.
And that's how Inside Out Equine Health started.
That's super cool. And I think there's a lot of horses that would be very grateful for that.
Yes.
Well, I'm very grateful for it because I love it. I absolutely love what I do, and I feel really fortunate to be able to, be involved in the health and nutrition of horses.
Yeah, I mean, you can really tell that I was present at your talk at the equine retreat in Mansfield last year, and that's the first time I'd actually heard you talk. And I know a reasonable bit about nutrition, but it was one of the most informative talks that I've attended. Like I felt like there were so many gold nuggets in there for horse owners, and you can just really feel your passion come through there, which is really important.
Thanks, Raquel. That's very nice of you to say.
Thank you. So I would just, yeah, like to know some of your kind of key things. Like obviously gut health is super important in horses, and it can be quite a minefield for people to figure out what to do from that perspective, and also the time that it takes, for the gut to get back into balance for some horses that might have been struggling for quite some time, like your off the track thoroughbred. I mean, their diets are, you know, often quite challenging with the stress of being in a performance horse environment.
Yeah.
So, would you like to chat to us a bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, you've sort of like gone straight in the deep end
Yeah,
because
I have.
I think I think gut health is probably, one of my favorite topics, and certainly the gut-brain axis. I just love going down that gut-brain axis rabbit hole. And for anyone that has any interest in human nutrition, they would know that the link between the gut and the brain is extremely strong. If you think back to, people saying that they have a gut feeling, I mean, that sort of like just speaks so much to how our brain and our guts are linked and that two-way communication between them. So a lot of the time people will say, I'm having behavioral issues with my horse. And is it a behavioral issue or is it an issue with the gut? Sometimes, you fix the gut issues and the behavioral issues go away. Sometimes, of course, there's a plethora of things that it could be because it's horses, and we all know that horses just love to, throw us curveballs 24/7 and make us scratch our heads constantly and prove, make us be wrong all the time. Every time you say, I'm 100% sure of this, a horse will just come along and say, nah, you were wrong. I'm the exception to the rule. Yeah, so and that whole how long does it take to heal the gut is sort of like how long's a piece of string? What else is going on? Like how damaged is the gut? Like there's it's so multifactorial, I suppose. I like to think of horse health as like like a pie or a pizza. There's so many different slices. So you've got like, like feet, like of course the feet are like absolutely crucial. Then you've got posture and biomechanics, which is another, and of course they're all completely interlinked. But if you're missing pieces of that pizza, then you're not going to have a fully functional, healthy horse. So, sort of going on to gut health. So, I always like to say that a simple horse should have a simple diet, and a complicated horse needs a more complicated diet. So, every time I get a consult for a horse that's got something complicated, it never ends up having the diet that I want it to have. And sometimes we do get there, sometimes we get back to that simple diet, but usually we've got to go with that more complicated diet. And as I press send with the diet report, I'm always quite apologetic to the person. I'm like, look, your horse is tricky. We're going to need to make this diet a lot more fiddly than what I would like. I'm one of those silly people that's taken on rescue horses before, and they come to me, and when they come, their diets are complicated. I'm fiddling around with this and that and all that kind of thing, and they're getting more calories and they're getting different types of hay and all that kind of thing. And then my aim is always to get them eating a fairly similar diet to my other horses, which is, ideally super duper simple and straightforward, which is basically like hay, always hay. Like I can't ever talk about how
Stress.
important feeding hay is. Even if you have a paddock full of grass, you need to feed hay if your horse will eat it. And most of the year they will. Um, and I guess, I'm going to get completely distracted if I start talking about the difference between hay and grass now. But, it's hay, a variety of hays, because that variety of roughages and fibers really helps the gut and the gut microbiome. Then we need some good quality protein, ideally a couple of sources of good quality protein, some vitamins and minerals that are balanced to the rest of the diet, without adding in things that horses don't need because they're already in excess of their in their diet. And then we have like some sort of anti-inflammatory, like an omega-3 fatty acid, like flaxseed oil or something like that, and then salt. So, and that's a vitamin and mineral, obviously. So it really should be that simple. Um,
Yeah, my horses are like, except for Jelly because of his muscle condition, but
yeah,
like my horses are that simple. Yeah.
yeah. And that's what we should all be aiming for. And we might not all achieve it. And if you have an old skinny thoroughbred, you're probably not going to have that simple of a diet. But anyone else, or unless you've got like a horse that's in intense work, like I do a few diets for endurance horses and race horses. And yes, they're going to need a little bit of starch. They're going to need a little bit of extra sort of like electrolytes and things like that. But I mean, let's face it, most of us aren't there doing intense work with our horses as much as we'd probably like
So,
to
and
be.
sometimes our idea of intense is not actually intense for the horse.
No, no.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So, like keep it simple is always the best strategy if we can.
So I'm just wondering, could you just give people a basic, even just a few moments insight into what the basic design of the horse's intestinal system is? Because I feel like that's important for the context of, especially a biggest point, roughage.
Yeah. So, oh golly, you're really like testing me now.
Sorry.
Raquel's probably better at talking about this. You've got the vet degree.
It's an area that I find quite complex because of the horse's gut is a fairly complex system compared to a lot of other animals, I think, in terms of
Absolutely.
like just, how important each, I mean, obviously they have the stomach, the small intestine, the large intestine, but how important each aspect of that really is for the horse. Like, I don't know, do you think it's more complex than some of the other animals, or am I
Oh,
just
it's 150% more complex. And the other thing is too, is when we're talking about like ruminants and things like that, like their gut, we're not really that worried about their gut. We're trying to fatten them up to eat them, or, like remove the wool. We're not really that fussed about it.
and
And that
their
may well be.
stresses are probably, relative in their lifetime. Their stresses are generally less than horses because we don't, you know, like they get handled a few times a year for husbandry reasons, whereas horses are getting handled every single day, and we're
Yeah,
kind of doing a lot of things to them which are not necessarily natural, which creates stress,
yeah.
which then puts that stress back on their gastrointestinal.
And and their
And
guts
we
are a lot
feed them
more.
all sorts of things.
Yeah, their guts are a lot more robust as well. So, like we're not that concerned with, a cow or something having ulcers. And then, we have ulcers, and we've got mucosal ulcers, we've got gastric ulcers, We've got completely different risk factors for both ulcers. They've got the hind gut, and when we feed our horses too much grain and it travels through to the hind gut, we then start creating like a sort of a breeding ground for bad bacteria. And then we have issues with the hind gut that we know so little about.
Yeah, we
Um,
really do.
you
Yeah.
know, like we can't see the hind gut. There's no scope that's long enough to reach the hind gut. And there's even, questions about whether or not horses can have hind gut ulcers. This is still like a big, no one really knows because to find out, the horse has to be dead. Um,
I've certainly under dissection seen some very unhealthy like mucosa in the hindgut, where
yeah,
it's a generalized inflammatory looking response, like it's not it's like there's more inflammation, there's more redness, the mucosal surface is weird, it's not as smooth as it should be. It feels thinner, like through the
yeah.
wounds. But yeah, the challenge is that to diagnose that in the live horse is very difficult, apart from putting together pieces of like posture and muscle health and poo health and you're kind of just putting all these things together to try to add it up. It's really challenging when the hindgut is so important for the horse.
So, their hindgut fermenters, and that the health of that hindgut is so important, yet we know so little about it. And, horse people, we're busy. Like we're busy. We've all got jobs because we have to have jobs to afford horses. And then we have horses, so we're busy looking after them. And then, the added pressure of, okay, well, here's this hindgut that's really important, but I don't really know much about it. And so our go-to as human beings is like, what can I possibly do to help my horse? And we go to, I think it's natural. We go to the quick fix. And so we see a product that says, great for hindgut health. And then we go, oh, amazing, I'll be able to sort that out. But in reality, is it sorting out the hindgut? And I was listening to a webinar that Nerida McGilchrist was doing, and she said this great line, and I've started using it as my own. She said, adding in a gut supplement when the rest of the diet is up the wazoo is like putting out a bushfire with a garden hose.
Yeah.
And I love that analogy so much. Like, it's much more difficult to get the rest of the diet right and and it's not just the diet, it's also about how we keep our horses, or like how we train our horses. So we can't say, oh, I'm pretty sure my horse has gut issues. I'll give them a gut supplement and expect that we're going to have things fixed. It just doesn't work like that.
Yeah,
Management
the
is such
times. Sorry, Soph.
Oh, just management is so important. We'll get onto this because you had expressed it was very important to talk about the gut-brain axis as well. But just the fact that all the things that happen in our horse's life influence their tummy and vice versa, as you were saying before, like what's happening in the gut. You often see behavioral issues, fizzy horses. I was with somebody a couple of weeks ago who was working with yearlings on a horse, and he was leading them from the horse. And because he had come to the stud, he said, "Oh, great! Like I'm going to use some of this free yearling feed." And I was with him for just watch him for a few days. And the one day he gave them yearling feed, the next day his horse was completely like on its back legs, and it took like about 4 days of him being like, not doing that again, like not doing that again. So you just see that manifestation, but yeah, when you're talking about what's influencing inside the tummy from outside the tummy. So if you think about the intestine, you've got like the horse chews, swallows to the tummy, and then, in your stomach, like you said, you've got acid, which is what can cause the ulcers when you're not managing your feed system and your feed protocol, and your timing well. And then you've got your quite long small intestine, which is where your simple carbohydrates, so a lot of your sugary feeds like your bagged feeds, etc., and some proteins and things, they're broken down more by like enzymes, and they pass into the body. And then that feed travels into the hindgut, so the horse's large intestine, and then that's where you've got all your microbial populations that often will digest the things that didn't get digested in the small intestine. So things like your roughage, your hay, your more complex fibrous stuff. And there's also things that aren't digested and they form bulk that leaves the horse, and they poop some of that out as well. And so that helps to keep the gut healthy. So anything that you do that creates stress in the horse can influence the microbiome. And so then you can, like you said, if your diet isn't doing well and you're just giving a gut supplement, if your diet itself doesn't have the things that you need to nourish those different parts of the intestinal system, either because you are nourishing the population of microbes that keep the gut healthy, or because you're feeding too much of the sugary stuff that's absorbed in the small intestine, then you're already thrown it out. And so, like, that's a good saying, you're trying to put out a fire with a garden hose. You're kind of like, I'll just give a gut supplement and hope that that deals with the whole issue, and it's just not possible.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And like digestion starts from the mouth. That the saliva is extremely important.
Mm.
And I always talk to people about the that horses don't have a gallbladder. So they just produce bile at the rate of around about 300 mils an hour. And if your horse isn't chewing, which creates saliva, so saliva is alkaline, bile is obviously acidic. So, and particularly in summer, like I look out my window and see my horses standing in a corner for hours, like
Yeah.
it's hot, they don't want to move. So they're standing out there for potentially like 3 hours. That's 900 mils, give or take, of gastric acid that is being released from the bile duct into the stomach. Um, so I'll just go back a step. So as humans, we have a gallbladder. So when we eat, our brain says, "Oh, you need some bile," like releases it, and that's how we, the digestion. And of course, bile is really important. Like horses have bile for a reason. So look out, see my horse, been standing there for 3 hours. That's almost a liter of bile that's just sloshing around in its stomach. So then I pull it out of the paddock and we go and do some like lunging or something like that. The stomach constricts and then it's pushing up the bile. It also doesn't just stay completely upright. So even simple things like feeding them lucerne prior to working them. So lucerne high in calcium, calcium is alkaline. Also, long stem fiber requires more chewing. More chewing creates more saliva.
Can I just say, so you're talking loose and hay?
Yes, lucerne hay. Yeah. And lucerne hay has this really bad reputation.
I love loose and hay. It's like my
Lucerne
favorite.
hay is the greatest thing ever. It's like I don't know, maybe it's like the equivalent of avocado because it's like so good for you, but also so delicious.
Yeah.
You wouldn't eat like 7 avocados a day. Um, I mean, you probably could, but I don't know. Anyway, that's
Probably not good for you at that point.
No.
yeah. So, it's something that horses love. It's high in protein, it's low in sugar, it's high in calcium, it's helping that calcium phosphorus ratio. For young horses, it's amazing because, and I guess I want to circle back a little bit to what you were saying about the yearling feed, Sophie, because that's one of my pet peeves as well, but I'll get too distracted. So, um, the lucerne hay, like horses love it. Like what horse doesn't like lucerne? I mean, it's just,
I have one client whose horse can't tolerate lucerne.
and it is
Every
absolutely
now and
legitimate.
again, you just get that horse. Like he's very sensitive to a
Yeah,
lot of things. He's just a hypersensitive little guy. But
yeah.
yeah, he's like one in.
I reckon I've done like since I've been doing this in like individual diets, so not counting like properties and all that kind of thing. I think I've done maybe like 1,500 diets, and I think I've probably met maybe 5 or 6 horses that can't tolerate
Yeah.
lucerne. So
Yep.
it's an extremely small number. And again, there are a few laminitic horses that can't tolerate lucerne, but again, it's just
Valuable.
it's such a small amount that we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. So, lucerne, it's such a good feed. And yeah, so going back to the gastric acid and the bile, feeding something like that, we've got the digestive enzymes, we've got the saliva, we've got the lucerne itself. And that creates like a fiber mat, like a literal mat in the stomach to prevent that splashing. So, whereas if I want to go for a run, which I don't because ain't nobody got time for that. But if I was to go for a run, I don't want to eat a big meal before I go for a run. But horses, we have completely different gastrointestinal systems. They need to have food in their stomach before they exercise.
Yeah, I think also, just the fact that I noticed when we had like those really hot days and you said how the horses were just standing, standing around. Um, but also the stress of the heat as well on top of that. So they're not eating as much for that period of the day and then they're just hot and some horses really, and then you're feeding them extra electrolytes, which may then shift the balance of their gut, or for some horses could be irritant on their gut, depending on their gut health. So we really have to think about, it's probably another conversation about managing horses in like extreme conditions because that changes everything for them. Like, yeah, I just found it so interesting how my horses stood around so much when it was that 43-degree,
Yep.
not eating, even though they had the same amount of food there to eat.
Well, and I mean, I don't know, like I haven't actually looked into this, but feeding, poor or feeding roughage is brilliant for keeping horses warm. So,
Yeah, that's also what I was thinking too on those days. Like, yeah, they don't want to really eat the roughage because they're already so hot.
Up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. So I don't know if that is, plays into it at all. But certainly it could. So you're
Yeah.
right, and on those hot days, I always feed my horses like a little bit of microbeat and
Yeah.
things like that really high quality fibers that also soak up a lot of water so that they can have those extra electrolytes. And I know they've been missing out on forage, so then I'm sort of replacing it with extra fiber that I know they're going to eat because it comes out
Yeah.
of the bucket, which instantly makes it taste, 100 times better.
Yeah, of course. Um, so obviously, yeah, that's kind of, letting people know the importance of roughage, the gastrointestinal system. I'd also like to touch on protein a little bit because we've had a few horses in the postural course, older horses. Like we had a 29-year-old horse in our
Yes.
last postural course. And, one of the things that was integral for that horse was checking the protein amounts. And I've had a few horses over time where they're doing all the things, but the muscles just, meh, they just don't look that good. And then we increase their protein, and for them, it's made a massive difference. So, could you just talk a little bit about kind of protein
Yep,
management
I thank
in
you for bringing that
diet?
up because that's really interesting. So, they're going back to the sort of science of feeding horses, they have a recommended daily intake. So, if you look up the textbook, this has been very well researched, and there's a recommended daily intake as per the, nutrition, the NRC, the nutritional requirements of horses. Um, and this is a really important bit of information, but like with a lot of really important bits of information, it needs to be properly interpreted. And, you know, like I think people go on to FeedXL and like I love FeedXL. FeedXL's great, but I like to say that having FeedXL without the knowledge that goes along with
Yeah, like anything.
feed is like having someone drive a race car when they've got a regular car license.
Yeah.
So, like if you don't know more about the actual feeds, Feed Excel can be a little bit misleading. And if you don't understand where you need to make some interpretations, is that a word?
Yeah.
Did I
Yeah.
just make that up?
No, that's a word.
Um, So, you can be steered in the wrong direction. People, I see it online all the time. People are like, oh, like I can't get 100% RDI, recommended daily intake for everything in
Yeah.
Feed Excel, so my horse's diet is unbalanced. Okay, one, it's impossible to get the diet perfect.
And it changes
Two,
all the time. Like,
correct. There's no such thing as a perfect diet.
yeah,
And three, we need to, horses are the best teachers. Our horses tell us what they need, more or less. Like if we have a bit of an idea, and we all know our own horses the best, we need to, use common sense in addition to these really useful tools. So going back to protein, so, you know, like older horses, their nutritional requirements increase because their ability to digest and absorb nutrients decreases. So, Feed Excel might tell us that our horse needs, 75, grams of protein, but when we look at our horse, it could be that they need 125.
yeah,
And the same with calories, and I really don't like that this RDI of calories in the diet because our horses are the ones that tell us if they need more or less calories. You could be feeding 100% RDI of calories, and your horse could be obese or emaciated. And you would be completely silly to go, well, I'm doing what, the science says, and here's your horse that's got laminitis because you've been feeding it way too much. And
yeah,
protein's not quite that different because horses have a minimum protein requirement, but your horse will tell you if it needs more or less protein. And people always say, oh, what can I feed my horse to get more top line? Well, if you're working it in a shitty way, then it doesn't matter how much amazing quality protein you're feeding it, it's still going to look terrible. So going back to protein needs to be of a high quality. So we've got essential amino acids. Our horses cannot synthesize their own lysine, so we need to provide them lysine in their diet. Does that mean we need to add in like a whole bunch of like lysine by itself? No, it means that we need to make sure that the diet contains adequate lysine. The other ones are methionine, threonine. There's some really important essential amino acids there that they need to have. Um, and then having protein from a variety of sources is also really important because each feed stuff contains protein, like a different sort of set of proteins. So, lucin, I love lucin. Lucin's like a super great form of protein. And then we've got like something like copra, which is really high in crude protein, but is lower in some of the essential amino acids. So I'm certainly not, saying don't feed copra, like copra has its place. But then we've got things like, hemp meal, which are also really useful proteins. Hemp meal has a fairly similar analysis to soy, but without some of the, more negative or potential negative aspects of soy. And again, I'm really cognizant of not throwing out the baby with the bathwater. We can't throw out copra because it's low in essential
yeah.
amino acids. We can't throw out soy because it doesn't agree with some horses. In reality, we have limited feedstuffs available to us. We need to make sure that we are incorporating them as what's appropriate for our horses. So yeah, hemp, another really great protein source. If your horse needs more calories, something like lupins are amazing. They've got like a nice amount of essential amino acids, and they've got a balanced calcium and phosphorus ratio.
Can I just ask a question with the lupins? Because there's different forms that the lupins come in, like crack lupins, micronized.
Micronized, extruded, yep.
Yeah, so in terms of that, which form is actually preferred, or is that variable as well?
Yeah, it's variable. So if you have an older horse, or a horse that has gut issues, then feeding something that has already been heat treated is potentially going to be advantageous. Or if
So
you,
like your micronized is heat treated, is it?
yes, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, or extruded, which is even more heat treated.
Yeah.
Um, So, but then we're increasing the um, amount of money that costs us. So, if your horse needs extruded lupins, feed them extruded lupins. If they need micronized lupins, feed them micronized lupins. If they don't need them, then your cracked or crushed lupins that have been pre-soaked are completely fine. To this day, I have not, and I've, had a lot of horses. I have not personally had a horse that's required them to be micronized or extruded, but I've certainly had client horses that have done far better on micronized and extruded. Also, keep in mind that lupins are already low in sugar and starch, so heat treating a lupin is not going to remove a lot of starch. And heat treating starch, if we are feeding our horses starch, then heat treating starch is incredibly important. It sort of breaks down the starch into more digestible pieces so that it's better dealt with by the hindgut, and we can feed higher quantities of starch if we heat treat it.
And just for, people who are listening who are like, well, what feeds a starch? Like some people might not know, like when you say, okay, like you want some of the starch to be heat treated to break down it from a negative perspective to help it to be more digestible. But what feeds are actually starch if we're talking?
Grains.
Yeah.
So barley, corn, wheat, and then things that sort of like aren't called grains, but sort of are grains like pollard, mill mix or mill run, all that is
Oats, you put oats in there as well?
yeah, so oats
Or they're
oats are also a starch, but they are a safer starch because of where they're digested by the horse. And also, if you think about an oat and you think about how much fiber there is attached to the oat, so you know, visualize here with me, but when you're looking at an oat and you sort of put your fingernails in and you open it up, there's that little starchy bit inside, and the outside is all fiber.
yeah.
So oats are like a far state safer way to feed starch, but alternatively, if you feed your horses whole oats, you'll find that a lot of the time they just come out the way that they went in. So you need to make sure that your horse is actually digesting them if you are feeding oats as a starch source. So in when I do diets for people and they do need some starch, I sometimes veer away from oats, even though I like the starch they provide. But I sometimes go for like a extruded barley or something like that. So a heat treated barley, because the starch is broken down, but they're still getting that energy source. But again, like I do a lot of horses, a lot of diets for pleasure horses, and there just aren't that many that really need
No.
starch. Like it's
Wait,
just not a thing.
there'll definitely be some people wondering, how do I know if my horse is a horse who needs to have their feedstuffs extruded or micronized? How would you tell people to tell?
That's a good
So,
question. So if you are feeding if you are soaking lupins really well and you are still seeing lupins in the feces, that's a very good way of knowing. And so, if that was happening, and really you shouldn't be seeing any
Whole foods in
lupins
there.
in the poo if you've soaked them long enough. And by long enough, I mean like 20 minutes. Um, don't soak them overnight if it's hot because they start to ferment, and that's very bad to feed your horse fermented lupins. But even in summer, like 20 minutes. In winter, in winter, like when it's cold, you can leave them overnight. That's completely
You're
fine.
not going to get that fermentation.
No. Um, or if you've tried the lupins and they're not working, you're not seeing those weight gains, then certainly trying them extruded would be something to explore. But again, the amount of horses that need them to be treated is minimal, and I would prefer to go and feed, like more oil or something like that. Because it's going to be more easily digested by like your older horses. Um, or like a hemp with oil added back in, something like that. It seems to really, put condition on older horses.
Yeah, I found with his 22-year-old thoroughbred who windsuck, so he's always harder to keep the weight on that, since having him on the hemp and the and your flax oil, like when I'm struggling with his weight, I just increase
Yeah.
those and they make a massive difference because he's hard to get enough. Like he loves lucerne. He would eat like a bale of lucerne a day, but in terms of getting enough food into him sometimes is difficult because he'll forget, he'll be like eating and then he'll go away from his food and be like, oh, what was I doing? So yeah, since adding in the hemp and the flax, they've made such a difference to maintaining his weight.
And I mean, the other thing about feeding like the hemp that I have, the Promega one that has the oil added back in for an older horse, you're getting like that high hit of protein from the hemp meal. Then you're getting the hemp seed oil added back in with its particular amino acids. Then you're feeding the flaxseed oil with its omega acids. And so the combination of those three things means that you're getting protein into an older horse, like a high quality protein, and you're getting those anti-inflammatories. So if the horse is having less inflammation, then they're also going to be more able to gain and maintain weight.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I found that super valuable.
It's interesting you're talking about adding in and out sort of individual pieces, which you're able to do with a diet that's been a little bit more customized for your horse, or like you said, keeping it very simple with just going along with the pieces of the diet, like you're talking about roughage, protein, salt, minerals, etc. When you look at bagged feeds, you don't really get to make any choice. And I know, so when I was at uni and we were doing calculations for sugar content basically for laminitis horses in the nutrition subject that we were doing, we went and got pictures of bagged feeds at the store and came back with the ingredients and then compared the claim on the front. So, this is safe for a laminitic horse. This is a cool product. This is for a working horse, etc. And then we did all the calculations. We were like, oh my God, there is absolutely zero claims here that are reflective of either the nutritional profile, because we also looked at electrolytes and they say, this is enough electrolytes. And then you go back and you make the calculation, you're like, we would need 17 tubes of electrolyte for an endurance horse, things like that are, yeah, so not reflective. What are your comments on giving people more power back to be a bit more discerning or be able to make decisions to better their horse?
So
Yeah.
can I just say before Erica starts here, like she's salivating because she just just wants to like talk
Yeah,
about.
everyone get ready. Yeah.
So I guess before I answer that question, I want to sort of go back to what you were saying earlier. So one day I clearly had too much time on my hands and I went and like researched every single feed that had cool or calm in its title, and there were 54. 54 feeds that
Yeah.
had cool or calm in the title.
It's a good marketing one, that one.
Yeah.
54 of them contain grains.
Yeah,
Yeah.
wow. Yeah.
All of
Yeah.
them.
It's
All of
such
them.
an it's such an injustice. You think, people battling something like laminitis and they're just giving their horse a product marketed to help them with that. And you're like,
Yeah.
that's immediately sending you backwards and it feels disingenuous.
It is disingenuous. So, in terms of like giving people power, that I think that's like a twofold thing. So, I mean, you know, if people turned the bag over and read the ingredients and understood the ingredients, they would have more power. Um, but as I said before, like we're busy, like we have horses, we have jobs, we have families, we have, and so when we see the bag that says, cool, whatever it is, suitable for our, kids' pony, we believe it. I mean, I could go down a whole rabbit hole when it comes to like human nutrition as well, like go to the bloody muesli bar aisles and look at the things that kids are supposed to eat, and it's like it's ridiculous. But anyway, I won't get onto that because it's a whole other podcast.
Yeah.
Um, but like turn the bag over read the ingredients because sometimes they don't even tell you. It's literally just like uh, like
Meals,
grains
some kind of
or
meal, like
grain
vegetable meal.
byproducts
Yeah,
or uh,
byproducts.
such and such super fiber or like it's trademarked. It doesn't even tell you anything that's in it. So that's, I guess, the first thing, like look at the ingredients, understand what's in it, understand, what meal mix is and what it means, and whether or not the barley's extruded or if it's just not heat treated at all. Um, and the other thing is like, like arm yourself with the knowledge to create your own diet or speak to a nutritionist that can help you because it's really easy once you,
Yeah.
and it sounds silly, it's easy once you know what to do, but it really is easy. And like there are some really, I guess, straightforward rules as to what a diet could look like for your horse, as long as it doesn't have complications. So, and by removing a lot of the bad things in a horse's diet, we can actually get the horse to gain weight. Like I've created diets for people that were feeding like 5 kilos of bagged feed a day. And I literally
Costing
take,
like so,
pardon?
costing so much.
So much, and not only costing so much money, but doing so much damage to that horse's gut that, when I take all that stuff away, the horse gains weight. Like we've removed, like 50 megajoules of energy and the horse gains weight. And sometimes I think that this is a marketing strategy because the more crappy stuff we feed the horse and the more damaged its gut is, the more we have to keep feeding them that crappy stuff for them to maintain weight. And when we take that away and we heal their gut and we replace it with whole foods and balance it out, and increase the roughage and their gut heals, they're able to maintain that weight by themselves without all that bagged feed.
I think it goes the opposite way too, right? Like the fat horse that's getting fed nothing, and then you increase
Absolutely.
the roughage,
Yep.
and you like they end up getting fed more,
Yep.
but they lose weight.
Yep.
So it kind of goes, and it happens in people as well, right? Like people
Abs-
overweight, they're eating nothing, and then skinny people eat a lot,
Absolutely.
and then you balance out the gut, and the weight balances out, and all the influences on the gut and everything. But
Right.
yeah, so it's not always as simple as going, my horse is fat, I'll feed less, or my horse is skinny, I'll feed more. It's really about getting that balance and really making sure that they're getting an appropriate amount of good quality roughage.
Yep.
And I know like with Jelly, he used to be like so fussy. He was so fussy, but he was fat, and I still have trouble making him look like a lean horse, like he's always a bit round. But he um he was so fussy, and I couldn't change anything. If his feed was too wet, if his feed was too dry, if I added a little teeny bit of something new. But as his gut has got healthier, I can today add in some electrolytes because it's hot, or add in some extra protein because I'm working him today, or I can change things a little bit, and he eats all of his food every time now, and he can cope with it being too wet, too dry, like whatever. He just eats it all now. He's not a fussy horse anymore. So
Yep.
I think that's also an example where improving gut health. And it took a while for his gut to get to that point. Like, I mean, I was probably didn't really know how to feed him because of his muscle condition. So it took me a while to figure that out. But I would say it probably took a good 12 months for
Yep.
him to become a normal eating. He still eats, he still loves food. Don't get me wrong. Like he will scrounge up every scrap. Like that's just him. But yeah, it took quite a period of time that I would say his gut to become healthy. So in terms of time, like do you find that with horses, that we can't just fix them in a couple of weeks?
Horses never fail to surprise me. So, I sometimes, I mean, like I have a reasonably good read about how things are going to go most of the time when I create a diet. I can sort of look at a horse and look at what the people are feeding and go, and sometimes I'm like, oh man, this is gonna be so easy, like so easy. And sometimes I'm like, oh, this is gonna be really tricky because
Same when we come from like a bodywork perspective as well.
yeah. And like usually I'm right. Like it
Yeah.
sounds really like usually I'm right.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there's times where I'm just so wrong, like where I'm like, oh man, this is gonna be so hard. The client's doing like so many really good things already, and I'll tweak like one thing and bam,
Hey.
like just it's so like, and then other times where I'm like it's going to be so easy and it's a struggle. I've seen like a horse, like I've got this one in my head, and they were really really knowledgeable, and they were doing like heaps of the right things, and the horse just looked horrible. It was like an older thoroughbred, like, and it just looked horrible. And I was like, right, I've got all these things in my head that you could be doing, but just feed them a biscuit of lucerne every day. Keep doing everything you're doing, but feed biscuit of lucerne every day. That horse like turned around in a month.
Yeah,
It
wow.
was just like it literally became a completely different horse in 1 month from one biscuit of lucerne a day. And that's not the normal thing that I would expect to happen. But they just constantly surprise me. So, I had a quarter horse, like a skinny quarter horse. And whenever I see a skinny quarter horse, I'm just like, okay, there's clearly
Something real bad going on.
well, yeah, there's like there's
So
something
rare.
not quite right. Like, and as soon as I figure out what that something is, it's going to be completely fine.
Yeah.
And quarter horses love to just like turn around really quickly. But this lady's quarter horse, it was skinny, and I was like, oh, you're not doing anything that bad. Like, I think it went to the trainer, and the trainer fed it lots of grain and not enough hay. Typical, like very very typical thing. And I'm like, yeah, it'll come good. Like, we're just gonna get rid of the grain, feed more hay. It's gonna come good. It took like ages and ages and ages, and she'd be saying it hasn't happened yet, and I'm like, just be patient. And I'm like, man, what's going on? Anyway, I think it was there like 8 months or something for a quarter horse. That's a long time.
Wow.
Um, but there's no timeline. There's really no timeline for horses. They do it when they want to do it. And what I say to people is just like persist, persist, persist. They might go backwards before they go
Yeah.
forwards. And if they're going backwards at an alarming rate, then by all means, like get back in touch. We need to put some tweaks in place, but expect them to go a little bit backwards and then they start going forwards. But the timeline is
And there's so many factors that are contributing there.
so
Like obviously,
many.
nutrition is very important, but there's a lot of environmental
100%.
factors and then, feet balance and teeth
Yeah.
health and
Training, you know,
parasites, which we haven't really kind of talked about, but there's so many other aspects there that are going to kind of influence that. We're probably like getting up to the end, but maybe we just touch briefly on the importance of parasite control. Like just I know you could talk about
just
that.
briefly, just like we just
Yeah,
touch
just
on this at
touching.
the end.
Yeah, I know it's like super important, so I want to kind of fit it in this episode.
You'll have to
And
come back.
yeah, but just kind of because that could be a limiting factor for some horses, I guess.
You know what? It usually isn't.
Yeah.
Um, it can be, but it usually isn't. And like, no, I'm not throwing any shade on vets. But I do find that, and I think it's changing, but like the vet would come out and see a skinny horse and be like, oh, it's probably worms.
Yeah.
And it just usually isn't. Um, so I'm not downplaying, that like parasites, can be a significant issue. But having done like thousands of fecal egg counts and hearing from the person like, because one of the questions on my form is, do you think that parasites are playing a significant impact on your horse's health? And I found that there's pretty much no correlation between whether or not someone thinks it is and it actually is. In the same way that, they ask racehorse trainers, which horses do you think have ulcers? And there's almost no correlation between who they think has ulcers and who does have ulcers. That doesn't mean that ulcers don't play a huge factor in the health and well-being of our horses, but horses, they're prey animals, so they're constantly hiding, and the issue might come out in different ways. So, I mean, I feel like parasites, it's tricky, but it's also really easy. Like do fecal egg counting, like worm your horses once a year, like regardless because of bots and things that aren't picked up in fecal egg counts, and do fecal egg counting in between. It really is sort of that easy. So, about 50 years ago, we had a real issue with large strongyles. They were really quite pathogenic. And the advice for treating our horses for that was to worm them every 8 weeks, because that's the life cycle of the large strongyles. Treat them every 8 weeks. So that's what we did, and we basically got a handle on them. But
And then
that
people just kept doing that.
people kept doing it, and we're putting these hardcore chemicals into our horses every 8 weeks for no reason whatsoever. So 20% of horses have 80% of worms. Now, I have my own theories about why a horse becomes a high shedder, and why that 20% carry the 80% of parasites. It's not researched or anything, but I have my theories about it. But you should know whether or not your horse is a high shedder or not. And if it is, you worm them more regularly. And if it isn't, you worm them less regularly. It's really as simple as that.
And when you say once a year, around what time of the year do you, and obviously we're in Australia, but what time of the year are you talking there?
So typically once we've had a couple of frosts, because in theory, the frost kills the bots, the adult bot flies. So if the bot flies are not flying around and laying bots on our horse's legs or body, then and we've removed the bots, then we should be treating all the bots. Now, I've found that not always the first frost kills the adult
Uh,
bots.
Last
And
year, I think, or no, was it the year before? We had a few frosts and the bots were still around.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
too.
So, but keep in mind that if we treat them with something like a Quest, it stays in the tissues for longer. So even if, we treat them with a Quest and then we have, bot flies a couple of weeks later, they're still probably going to be okay. The other thing to keep in mind is if your horse does have a lot of bots, they might not be treated for all those bots with one treatment.
Because
So
of the life stages and
yeah, and so, or like I just got
life now.
an unhandled mare, um like from northern New South Wales, and so she's unhandled, so she's never been wormed with a paste before, only ever with the pellets. And obviously no one's ever removed the bot eggs from her legs. And when I gave her the pellets, the bots that came out was like off the charts. So
Yeah.
I would expect that, like the first and the second time I treated her, there would be a great deal of bots that came out, not just because there were so many in there to begin with.
Yeah,
Okay,
and then worm based on fecal egg counts, where you can send off the poo to someone like Erica, or a lot of vets also do fecal egg counts these days. So it's become a lot more cost effective and easier to do. So it should be just something that you routinely do
Yeah,
when deciding
yeah.
to worm.
But just keep in mind that you can't see all parasites, and particularly bots, because the
Yeah, they don't.
eggs are laid on the outside of the horse, not on the inside, and I'm looking at the eggs. Yep.
Do you do drench resistance tests as well for people? Do you recommend those?
Yes, but I can almost always t tell you what the result is going to be without actually doing the test. So the fecal egg count reduction test. So if you have used like a fenbendazole or something like that, like if your horse has a high egg count and you've used a fenbendazole, I can almost tell you that like when I redo the egg count, there's a huge amount of resistance, and I'm going to see a number that's almost the same. And even though people are saying there is resistance to moxidectin, I've never seen it myself in a fecal egg count. So, there's a really great resource, a PDF, and you've just jogged my memory. It's ancient, like from 2001 or something like that. And some of the like the first page is like it's a done by the New South Wales DPI or something like that. And the first page is a little bit outdated, but the second page is like and I'll share it with you afterwards, like a PDF of all the different active ingredients in the wormers, and then which parasite groups have resistance to them and how bad the resistance is. And that is like spot on. In my experience, it's spot on. So if someone sends me like a test 2 weeks later and they've used Moxie, it's always 95+% treatment rate. And if it's a fenbendazole, it's always, like not even 50.
Yeah, cool. All right, that I think that has given a pretty complete overview for a podcast. So I think that was really great. Would you like to share any takeaways, Erica? We've got a few written down ourselves, but do you want to kind of just share any things that
Yeah, so I guess, if someone says, what should I feed my horse? I mean, obviously we've just spent the last hour discussing that, and it's not that straightforward, but it also is that straightforward. So like, if I like it, sorry, it can be that straightforward. So,
Yeah.
we feed roughage at 1.5 to 2.5% of the horse's body weight per day. Ideally, a variety of roughages. So, like different types of hay. That's the number one most important thing. Then we feed them, if we don't know that that roughage contains enough protein, which it hasn't in the last few years because of the craziness of the weather. So then we feed them a protein source. So whether that be like a biscuit of lucerne or half a biscuit of lucerne or some hemp meal or something like that. Then we feed them a vitamin and mineral supplement, because all all except one hay sample ever, they are all lacking in copper, zinc, selenium, iodine. And like, use one created by a nutritionist, not
Yeah.
by a large feed company. So I have a few available. They're all like very good, at sort of like, estimating what's in the hay and pasture and making up for what's lacking. Salt, according to how much work your horse is in and how much it sweats, and to some extent what color it is. So, if you have a black horse, you probably need to feed it a little bit more salt than you do if you have a palomino or a grey, just because they're more likely to sweat, or, like they're attracting more sun and reflecting. I mean, this is discounting rugging because I don't rug my horses. Ain't nobody got time for that. And then like if you don't have any green grass, which is the majority of Australia, like a lot of the year, an omega-3 fatty acid supplement. So really it can be that simple. If you're missing one of those things, your horse is probably lacking something. But if you're feeding all those things, your horse isn't necessarily, it could easily be a balanced diet.
Yeah, no, I think that's awesome. And I think lots of people will appreciate this, all of the information that we've shared, because it can be difficult for people to find if they're not kind of familiar with it. And like you said, a lot of the time you go to the feed store and they're selling the bag that's been marketed to them often, and whoever did the best marketing, like I know as a vet, we were pretty well marketed to by the drug companies, and we sold the client what the rep told us without necessarily doing our own independent research. So yeah, it can be a bit of a minefield, and this really simplifies it. So, my takeaways would just be like keep it simple. And if you are feeding starch, then look at like heat treatment of starch to help with the digestion of it. Sophie, do you want to chime in there with some
I
take?
think, yeah, just an action takeaway for people to do at home. Checking, done. So go out, get a stick or put some gloves on, have a look through the poo, check for undigested feedstuffs. We already look sometimes, for the length of the fiber to see, whether horses are chewing things up, etc. So go and have a look, have a check. And also, I think easy horse, easy diet is a good one. Complicated needs, complicated diet. The fact that, horses should be relatively uncomplicated. And as you said, the goal is to take them to pare the diet back towards being in a simple system. And just the reminder, the first few FOS, and then worm for bots every year, because that's it's a moving timeline because it's going to change every year, but it's a good metric for people to be able to use.
Yeah, and we should be moving away from just worming at the start of every season and actually doing fecal egg counts to know which horses require the worming paste at this time rather than just doing a blanket worming. And then, yeah, get an individual diet assessment, which Erica does, and make sure, if you need help, then seek it out because there are professionals out there who are able to help you. And from our perspective, from a posture perspective, the difference that appropriate nutrition makes to your outcome. And so if your horse is not looking good and they're not seeming to improve in the time frame that you'd expect them to improve, then definitely starting with nutrition is the key. Awesome. Well, thanks, Erica, for coming
Thanks so
on.
much for having me.
Yeah, it's been a great chat, so thank you. Thank you for joining myself, Dr. Raquel Butler, and Sophie Vandenberg in today's podcast. Enjoy your horse time. Please subscribe to the Equine Functional Posture podcast so you don't miss our weekly episodes, and give us a 5-star rating so that we can share more valuable insights. Reach out with any listener requests for topics that you'd like to hear about. You can find out more about Erica in the show notes as well. Thank you.
And we'll see you in the next exciting episode.